Good morning from Southern California, where it's just a few minutes after 8 a.m. And we're ready to begin today's webinar, ESP-Dorado Scenarios and Problem Solving. Today's presentation is focused on scenarios which show you how ESP-Dorado can make you more productive in management, OS 2200 operations, or software development and support. My name is Tim Pearson. Sitting next to me is Tony Sapienza. I'm the person responsible for sending you the emails in the last several weeks, and just about 30 minutes ago also. In a minute or so, I'm going to turn the webinar over to Tony, who is the architect of ESP-Dorado. Tony is also a vice president here at Formula Consultants. And before we conclude today's webinar, Joe Dale, who is president at FCI, will share a few final thoughts on today's presentation. Formula Consultants has been a partner with Unisys for more than 40 years. And I'm pretty sure that all of you that are dialed into this call today are familiar with Formula Consultants' high-quality tape management system, Star 1100. Formula Consultants has two other product offerings, IDS 2200, which is an intrusion detection, and the other FCI product we're going to showcase today, ESP-Dorado, or formerly called Enterprise Storage Pundit Dorado. And why do we use the word pundit in the title? Because a pundit is an expert at something, and ESP-Dorado turns you into an OS 2200 expert by using a modern interactive graphical interface for viewing OS 2200 files, tapes, and source elements. So I'm going to turn this over to Tony right now, and he's going to take us through some scenarios and how to solve those problems as they have come up on OS 2200 sites that we're aware of, and even in our own shop here where we also use a Dorado system. So good morning to you all from all around the world. We have people from Sweden and throughout the United States on this call. So enjoy as Tony takes us through how to use ESP-Dorado.
Good morning. I guess to some of you, good afternoon. My name is Tony Sapienza. I hopefully will session we took you through more of a reference look at the ESP-Dorado package, basically providing emphasis on many of the features and functionalities of the product. Today, as Tim indicated, we hope to take you through more of a user scenario to give you an idea of how we here at Formula have used the product in a lot of wide and varied manners. I hope most of you who did not attend the first session had at least a few minutes to take a look at the recording from the prior session, and maybe it would help you keep up with the pace that we're going to go through. Really, I'm only going to go through a very quick review of what we did last time and talk a little bit about the major features of the dashboard, which I show you here in a usage type environment here pretty soon. What I refer to as the limited or unlimited list, I guess really, in terms of looking at a wide variety of what I call corporate assets, that being either program files, data files, etc., print files that are on your 2200 enterprise storage. One of the things that has been that we're very proud of is the ability to do what we refer to as system-wide searches. Part of the ESP-Dorado architecture is really to harvest the entire source content from your OS 2200 platform and provide that in a system-wide search capability and results display. The primary target for a lot of our activity here is source content, and we have a very rich viewer for showing source content and a lot of the cross-reference capability within the product. a couple management tools. Who's ever used a Google search engine and ended up with a wide variety of results and didn't need to bookmark some of those? And once you had a whole bunch of bookmarks and you're focused on a specific purchase of a new BMW automobile, you may want to basically group those bookmarks into a singular source so you can recall them easily, and that's what we refer to as a task. And lastly, ESP operates on a copy of the OS2200 platform source content, but we also provide easy access to the OS2200 source itself on the Dorado platform through a wide variety of terminal emulators, Eclipse, and our local editors of choice. And today I'll be demoing both using Notepad++, as well as very quickly show you how you can get at the editor on the OS2200 platform. Now, this is a slide I brought in from last time, and I just want to make sure everybody's on the same playing grounds. What we have here is a little bit of the architecture, and we have an OS2200 platform with its disk and tape, enterprise storage. To that, ESP loads up a suite of OS2200 tools that will be used in harvesting the information, both metadata as well as source content. That information is brought down to a ESP server that runs on a standard Windows server somewhere within your data center or thereabouts under the control and privacy of your IT data center. And access to that information is done through a client. Pretty well all of the demonstration this morning will be focused on the client's usage. As we had talked about before, security is of the utmost importance, and everything from encrypting data transferred from the 2200 platform to standard Windows security to authentication and authorization security when the client signs in. If the client can get that information through their standard demand login process, then they'll be able to get at the copy of the content on the through the ESP client. If they're not able to, they will basically get a access is denied message. And of course, as I said, the client is really quite a rich client, and the dashboard is one of our primary features. There is ESP was developed with what we call an inherent capability of accessing data from either the top down. And what I'm referring to is we can come at data from our dashboard and or our list and gain access to that data. But as I'll show in the scenarios, not everything is easily retrieved in that manner. As I said, ESP has the capability for a system-wide search, and through our search assistance screen and the result screen that is displayed after that, we also have full access. And one of the things that really works well with the ESP program is the ability to switch back and forth with almost seamlessly, and you'll see that as we go through what we refer to as our new IT staff support. And that is the ability to switch between a top-down viewing of source content or going what we refer to as a bottom-up view. So I'll point that out later on, but I wanted to make sure you understand this what I will call a primary concept of ESP support to content. So as we've been presenting ESP at user shows and the Unites and Universes as has been known over time, as we've done demonstrations at customer accounts, whether it be on-site or remote, they keep saying, well, we understand the features, and yeah, there's certain things that stand out, but in a lot of cases, it's more of a reference type view of what is happening. And as I said earlier, what the intent of this presentation is to get to more of a user guide as to how to go after or how to use ESP. I have 6 scenarios which I have identified, of which I'm only going to go into a few this morning. One of the scenarios is what I will call enterprise storage management, and that is really the ability to observe how your fixed storage is growing, observe how your tape, be it physical or virtual tape library is increasing or decreasing over time, the ability to understand how users are actually consuming these resources, how much each user is consuming, and to watch growth patterns that are occurring through the usage of both your disk and your tape resources. A second way is that ESP can help is anytime that your site is involved in a new technology implementation, through either the discovery of what should be brought forward in use under that new technology, how to interact with your various departments to get more or less a collaborative agreement as to what to move when the time actually comes to make the implementation your final production environment, and to make sure that everything is understood between all the various departments at the point in time that the switch is thrown and the transition takes place. A couple other scenarios which we actually have documented on our website are an application modernization effort. In many cases, applications on the 2200 platform were developed back in the 70s and 80s. In a lot of those situations, people have either retired, moved on to other departments and or other platforms within your IT center, but you really have lost a lot of knowledge of how that application was built, where source content is at, where the various build streams are at, copy streams, maintenance activities, etc. As I said, this particular scenario is actually documented on our website and can be seen through its linkage. The same thing is also true about the help desk assistance. A lot of times when users call in at the help desk, they're really quite impatient in terms of, I really need help and I need it now. And what we have found is through ESP's, we'll call system-wide search capability, help personnel can get at the content of the problem as they've identified in a very short amount of time. So efficient identification of troublesome problems and quick resolution. Every site that we talk to is saying they're faced up with the problem of trying to replenish new staff to replace a lot of the wealth of knowledge and old-timers that have moved on. As a matter of fact, very recently there were a couple articles that were brought to the front, both with Unisys and basically looking at the possibility of moving forward through planning for the future, through in essence finding people to help capture the knowledge before it's gone, and to build proficiencies of people who are basically on the account. More recently, another article by Unisys was really being able to fill the bench with to close the skills gap. And one of the key things there is the ability to shadow, or as I'm going to refer to it, as to mentoring the new individuals who are brought into the account. So ESP is really positioned to help facilitate that new staff training need and make the new trainee quickly aware of the OS-2200 enterprise storage content and the corporate assets that he must manage. While not exactly in the same vein, there's a similar situation when, well, I'll pick a specific here, when Unisys might be considering to actually take over an account to assist a customer by taking over the outsourcing of their data center. The absorption of that new data center, the Unisys personnel being brought onto that account are completely new to the environment, and they need to get up to speed as quickly as possible. I think you'll see a lot of similarities in the in the capabilities for staff training, whether it be new staff or a new organization, in terms of how ESP can help facilitate that particular activity. So those are the scenarios that I'm going to kind of quickly go over today. As I said, we're going to go over the enterprise storage, the new technology, and the staff training. So here's the scenario that we're going to first address. And this is you're operating your data center, everything is moving along smoothly, but all of a sudden you started noticing an increased number of rollouts. Now in today's environment, disk is a lot easier to acquire and perhaps even cheaper, so rollouts may not be the best thing to look at, but I think you'll get the gist of this process if you just follow along here for a short bit. The intent here is really how can I manage, how can I investigate really what do I need to clean up to help alleviate some of this congestion that I have on my fixed storage. And then in preparation for doing that, how do I know I actually have enough resources in my scratch pool to help facilitate maybe a full backup? So let's go on to the first item here. And this is the ESP dashboard. As we said in the prior demonstration, everything noted here in blue is more or less affiliated with files and disk and/or files from tape. And everything noted here in red is basically associated with the Star 1100 product, which is also a formula product, as Tim indicated. There are two trend charts here that I want to go into very quickly because they help. This was actually a real case in-house, and that was we were getting some rollouts. As you, this chart is maybe a little difficult to read, so I'm going to clear a few things here to help. This red space actually represents, and by the way, it starts out here at 20 million tracks, and at the current time, we're up to about 21, 22 million tracks in total usage. Current total capacity in-house is just slightly over 21.5. So we're kind of sitting in that gray zone. And what was happening here was, as you can see, we were getting a slight increase in the number of tracks that was being used over this period of time, from last September through actually this snapshot of this particular database was caught earlier. The number of tracks that are actually currently loaded, again, part of the nightly update information, metadata that we're harvesting. So these are actually a representation of what was loaded, and so what ends up in the red is in essence files that have been rolled out to storage. We had three situations here that were occurring. The first situation was we were getting a slight trickle growth that was occurring to files from back in here of 37,000 files up to about 41,000 files. We did a purge process, got it down, but if you notice the results of dropping almost 4,000 files, or 10% of our file counts, really only gave us a very modest decrease in the amount of storage that was being required. I'm going to bring in a second chart which helps identify a little bit better. As we looked at the files on the system, again, another graph depicting the largest files in the system. And in this particular case, we had a whole bunch of system files that were taking up almost full capacity. Now you notice at this point in time, I've done no ECL, no terminal emulator, no nothing. I'm looking strictly at a client interface on a dashboard, and so really your operations center or anybody who's responsible for your enterprise storage doesn't really have to know a lot about the OS 2200 platform or even the specific environment that they're trying to analyze. So what I've got here is I've got a whole bunch of large files, and as a matter of fact, you're going to see some of those large files continue to spike in. By the way, this is more or less a full capacity file, 262,000 tracks. And if I do simply a click through, I now get, in essence, a list. All of the graphs are tied directly to list process. And if you notice this column right here, it says written. And what this is really from the largest file in the system on down to smaller files. And what I can do is we really recommend that ESP be operated on a multi-monitor type environment, because each one of the individual panes, as we refer to them, can be moved, and we're going to kind of do it this way and close things down a little bit. Can be moved so it's easier to understand a little bit about what's happening. So if you notice here, the file names are here. Those file names, this list is in order from the largest to the smallest file in your system. And in essence, you also can take a look at what is the cycle currently being used, what was the last date of reference, what is the current size, etc. So from this list, we can very quickly identify the large files in the system that no longer are being needed, and we can prepare them to be rolled out. But in a lot of cases, it may not be just that we may want to clean up. I'm going to go a little bit further and say we could do something like, and I've done a couple of these. I said, okay, I want to find print files that are eligible for deletion. I basically am used what we call a custom view, and I've already pre-organized this print file. And this print file basically says print files that are on the system, and we're going to cut this back just a little bit, that have not been referenced since January 1st, 2016. Well, I've got almost 500,000 tracks of storage in 3,000 files that I can recover by not even doing anything other than getting rid of print files that haven't been looked at for almost 3.5 years. I can easily lump those into ownership, and once it's in ownership, I can easily export that information to an Excel spreadsheet. And once that Excel spreadsheet is out, I now can basically break that Excel spreadsheet and attach it through an email and ask for various departments to coordinate this effort to, in essence, help reduce some of the storage needs which are currently causing some of these rollouts. So what we've looked at here is a purge process. Purge process was done on in-house files. We identified the fact that those files did not give us enough space. We went after large files within the system. That may not have given us enough space. Then we would go after maybe something that is really more for the archival or for the deletion cycle, deprecation cycle, and basically now have an ability to coordinate with various departments within house. So the dashboard really started the whole thing, but the cooperation between the dashboard and the file list and some external utilities really helps us manage, we feel in-house, manage our fixed storage system quite well. So I have a quick question, because I'm really trying to monitor my time here also. In-house, anybody have a current way in which they may use to help manage their disk resources? Anybody want to speak up?
Yeah, this is Terry. I'm with Perspective. And what we do is we have a file policy, and we run the FDB processor with a purge process and an archive process, and we use that in conjunction with an exclusivity list to prevent certain files from being purged from the system. And we do a weekly system where anything older than 7 days really gets purged off of our system. Okay. So it automatically rolls our fixed storage that way. But it also allows us to monitor and manage the removable.
So Terry, the only question I would have of you is, what do you use for? Is there a what I would call a pre-process capability to actually see what you're going to do before you do it? Is there anything that you use to coordinate with users? Or is that really the
No, it's a system policy that we have for stuff like you're displaying there. Why would you want to keep a print file around for 3 years?
Correct.
And our file retention policies are set that you would only keep files on the system for 30 days or from the date of last assignment, or in our case we do 45 days. So aside from like standard print files that'll go away after 7 days, then the rest of the files will go out to a 45-day, and they'll be archived into an archive file.
Okay. So in-house policy, and it seems it's obviously HUD's been around for quite a while, so it seems to work for you quite well. In some accounts, maybe the policies aren't as straightforward, and as I said, we evolved this one in-house. A lot of the visuals.
I can certainly say, outside of the OS2200 platform, this would be ideal for any storage environment in the open systems arena, where they literally do not have any view or insight as to what file systems are on their systems.
Yeah, I think. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The growth of our account has gone really from terabytes to petabytes in a short amount of time.
Okay.
And open storage, which is, the Unisys is well monitored, managed, and maintained, but the other systems, not.
Okay. So anyway, I'm more or less wrapped up on this, and it's really what I will call a resource management usage of ESP in terms of data center support. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go to the next scenario, and really the next scenario is it's pretty well inevitable. Every 3 to I don't know what the number is, 5 years, new technology comes along. Whether it's new technology in terms of equipment, I guess what was it, a good 10 years ago, virtual tape technology came into play. And there was a lot to do in the data center for that type of implementation. Actually, the physical implementation of virtual tape technology was really quite simple. Formative Consultants was involved in a lot of customers trying to figure out how to actually move the content from physical to virtual. But at the same time, there was a lot of work being done on assets that were basically in the either run stream or source code space. More recently, Unisys, of course, had their UTC implementation, and the $8 item came up. And while that was not necessarily a new technology, it was more or less the completion of a what you might call it, a year 2000 issue. That services, and this was Unisys' more universal answer to coordinating date time across the globe. Right now, Unisys is involved in actually a brand new capability, and what is referred to, I'm going to refer to it, it's been, I guess there's several code names for it, but I'm going to refer to it as the virtual 2200 technology. And that, in essence, is having the ability to operate your OS 2200 operating system on a VMware type architecture. And in that case, we may be facing up many of the same problems that we've had in the past, and that is the ability to look globally or system-wide at changes that might be necessary to make against ECL and our programs that will be affected by this new technology implementation. And the issue is, how do you find things system-wide? I think if you were to ask a old-timer within the 2200 platform, he might start with a FAS listing, or he might start, because he's got knowledge, he might start with one of the third-party utilities that are out there, and from there he's going to wean it down to certain production files, etc. If he didn't already have a list, maybe most of the old-timers have gone, and now you've got to depend upon some of these new hires that you've got coming into your department to help facilitate that. What we have, as I had talked about earlier, is really this global search capability within ESP, and I'm going to use a device mnemonic as a means here, and it's strictly a means to depict the search, the system-wide search capability. So don't get stuck on the specific example, but I'm sure you can expand very quickly as to how it might apply. I'm going to use an old device mnemonic that we had in-house for basically a physical tape library system. And what I've got here, by the way, in our repository, Formula has about 37,000 files within our system. Because we are a development house, we've got a high number. We've got over 16,000 program files. We have just over 700,000 elements, source elements, be it a wide variety of source elements. And within those source elements, they're broken down into all of these, I'll call them similar classes of ELTs and/or MASM and/or ELTs for, we'll say, run streams or MASMs or UCOBs or Cs in terms of program types. But what I'm going to do here is just go with a very, very simple search, and I'm going to say, okay, fine, show me all the files where U47L basically appears. And you now see a fairly heavy number of files that come into play. And what we really got within our system of almost 700,000 elements, we've got over 11,000 elements, as you can see by this number here. Sorry, I'm not highlighting things, but we've got about 11,000 elements that we would have to search within our system. Those 11,000 elements, I can basically tie that down a little bit. Well, I don't really want to look at, right now I'm more interested in something like run streams. So if I want to come in here and I want to basically give myself a run, and I want to look at something that says basically at ASG and U47L, so I'm looking only for elements that contain a run stream start indicator and contains some sort of assignment for the U47L. And so in this particular case, what I've got here, and as you notice here, if you notice here, the query is basically identified here that we're actually going after. And in this case, we've gone from 11,000 elements, well, we're down to only 7,000 elements. Now, one of the beauties about ESP is what we call pre and post filtering. So you can actually filter down your results a little bit without having to get in that vast amount. If you notice here, right now I've got everything being displayed as a grouped under qualifier. Just a second here. It's going to share. There we go. So I'm grouping under qualifier and file name. So I've got a fair amount. I know my qualifiers, for example, within the sys range and or the sys dollar range. I've got the ability to look at this type of this amount of information. We'll go production runs, which is pretty obvious. And under production runs, I now have, in essence, 29 elements in my production run that met that qualification. One of the things that we have implemented is the ability to, if you notice here in the right-hand side of the screen, I'm actually previewing the source content of that file, as well as I'm looking at what we call the hit list on the lower right-hand side. Let's bring that up so it's a little bit easier to see. So now all of a sudden I've got, in essence, within this ECL stream, I've got an assignment, and up here, of course, I had my run statement. So within a very short amount of time, I'm actually looking at files, but as I said, this brought up quite a bit of information. I can go back. I talked about this concept of pre and post filtering. I'm going to go back into here, and I'm going to type in sys dollar, and I'm going to type in, what's it called, Joe? Sys, there we go. Sys, there we go. Sys dollar, live dollar. One of the nice things is everything is brought in, so I don't have to remember how it's spelled. So what I've done here now is I said, okay, fine, let's go ahead and do a search. So now instead of seeing this massive amount of hits. That I had before, I basically have pre-filtered my search, or I could have come back in here and I could have post-filtered my search in the very same way. And as you can tell immediately, now it gets much smaller. So this ability to do a system-wide search, the ability to be able to pre- and post-filter to wind yourself down, the ability now to, in essence, and I won't do this, but in essence, to bookmark either the list that I'm currently looking at or to bookmark the file or elements that I'm looking at now gives us an ability, just as you would in a Google search engine, to come back at a later date and or pass information from what we call the pundit in the installation to some of the new hires. And you're giving those new hires the ability to more or less get directly to the problem, as opposed to spending hours or days to try to find the items that they are actually searching for to facilitate the job that they've been assigned. So that really is scenario 2, as I'm kind of referring to it, and that is the ability to facilitate new equipment implementation, to find the source elements, ECL streams, program files, etc., that are part of the process. I didn't do a program file. I've just been informed that I'm running a little long. I sometimes get long-winded. And I want to get into the third scenario because the third scenario has just as much impact as any other. Oops, sorry about that. And that is the ability to support new staff as it's coming into your account. In many cases, new Unisys staff, as I had pointed to the previous articles, need to go through a degree of they may have learned about C programming or they may have learned about COBOL programming back at the university, but they certainly didn't learn about Unisys ECL or maybe Unisys SSG, the scripting language, etc. But those can be taught in formal classes, and those can be handled in a very short and economical way through either online classes or through direct face-to-face class. The problem you really have is, how does this new staff now get introduced, and how do their job assignments get directed by some sort of what I refer to as mentor as it relates to applications and or data resources. And so what we're going to do here is very quickly talk a little bit about the dashboard, and then about the ability to dip into the most famous thing that we have within Unisys, and that is TIP program executables located in their own library with a completely unknown location of source code and build streams and support libraries for the collection process. So let's go back, and I'm going to clean a few things up here before we go on. And still cleaning, sorry. So from the dashboard perspective, one of the things is always trying to understand who's using up the most amount of disk within my environment. What we've done is we basically have created the top 20. But as you click on this list, you also can see a complete list and a grouping by any amount of qualifiers, ownership, account codes, depending upon how strong of an accounting and or project ID mechanism you have within house. So within a very short amount of time, and I can very quickly go from here by clicking on that particular bar within the graph, and I can see everybody who's basically under a specific account code. I can do various things such as group under that account code, so I can start getting a flavor for where I might go looking at in the system. As I said, I can kind of go use some of the preview capability in terms of looking at actual source content, etc. So the dashboard is really quite a good place for somebody to become familiar with how the actual system is being used. I could do something like look at tape media and look at the fact that various virtual libraries within our house and actually look at the tape content within that virtual library. I might do something like actually say I only want to look at the FERPR tapes because that has some meaning to me, and I want to look at the actual content on that FERPR tape, and I want to look at one of the program files in a FERPR tape, and I want to have the ability to actually see the source elements that are contained on that program file. So very quickly, a new hire can go from disk to tape to content. They can go to removable packs. They can go to shared disk systems. As you noted, one of the things here I didn't go through is some of these items up in here are referred to as custom views that each client user has the ability to specify, and/or we can go back to what I refer to as standard views. These are views that Formula Consultants has created that in essence get you into a particular environment. This actually leads me to the next thing, and that is how do you introduce a new client, a new user to your TIP environment? Well, as we all know, TIP files typically are kept out on removable packs in order to handle control of where those files are basically being located at. Our TIP system support basically allows us to take a look at any OS 2200 container file that contains a TIP file. That TIP file now can go, that user now can click down and click actually into the actual TIP file that's contained within those container files, and it just goes on and on. Another way to actually look at this, of course, is to come back through the dashboard, and that is come to our TIP file list. Sorry for bouncing around so much, but it does give you an idea. And I can do things like look at UDS data files, look at standard TIP files, or I can actually look at program files. Now, one of the things we have found, one of the clients who are currently trying the product out, they are big into transaction programs that are being deprecated, taken out of the system. And one of their primary issues within that environment is how do I find the source code? Well, because of our ability to do system-wide search capabilities, we basically can point at a transaction program that's loaded in a TIP file and basically say, okay, search the system and find the source code for that particular element. For that source code in that particular element, I basically can say, okay, there is the source code, and it's sort of interesting. Let's get rid of this other guy. There's the source code, and it's sort of interesting. This transaction program, and that's where it's located at. Or that's where the source is at. One of the things I may want to do is, however, how was that particular program built and how was it copied to that particular TIP file? By simply going to the file, and by the way, this particular element had quite a generation of building. If you notice here, the very first element was built in 1997. The last build was in 2013. So if I go to the most recent one and look at the source element, I happen to know that it's there's my source element, and here is my build file. So very quickly, without really having to go through the OS 2200 system, I've gotten down to that. I've gotten down to that source element. I've gotten down to its build stream. If I actually wanted to go, and this is one of the things I talked about, and I'm running out of time. I apologize. If I actually want to edit that source code on the OS 2200 platform through a simple click and through our, I'll call it connectivity to local editors, I am now looking at the source code from the OS 2200 program file because I have been given authority to do that through the same demand, user ID, password, authentication, and authorization process. I haven't violated anything, but I'm actually looking at the source code right now, and I have the ability to make modifications, to save elsewhere. It's the same type of thing that you would through a standard terminal emulator. Let's bring up a terminal emulator. Let's fire it up. Let's connect to it. Let's go ahead and go back to ESP. Let's change the fact that I want to change the editor of choice from Notepad to demand, and within demand, I'll go ahead and stay with, let's go ahead and change editor. I'm supporting and I want to change to @ed. I want to save, and now I want to go back to that same element and go basically now edit. And as you can see, we basically have brought up the element, and here basically working on that same element, but now in demand mode. That pretty well wraps. So the third scenario is, how do you help new users get quickly adapted to their OS 2200 environment and application programs, data files, etc., that are contained in that environment? Oops, sorry. Done a lot of things. So what we've kind of have gone through here is real quickly ESP's ability to discover, analyze, and basically provide you access to all of the enterprise storage components that are located on your Dorado platform. If you notice there, we did very little or no ECL and our understanding any utilities. We had access, full access to all of the metadata and content on a system-wide basis. And as we've always said, ESP really complements your Star 1100 users. I've really hammered hard. I apologize. I'm going to ask, Joe's got as Tim had indicated, Joe Dale has, oops, don't want to go there. Joe has kind of a closing statement.
Oh, hi, everybody. Glad to have you with us. I just want to point out that everything Tony was doing here was absolutely live on our system. There's no games being played. It's all stored on our machine with incredible response time. And on your big, powerful machines, it would be even better. Talk about the development of our application of policies to clean out storage. I just had a thought at that time that ESP it would be invaluable to help you develop those policies, to look and see what the situations were on your machine and how you might, on an ongoing basis, apply other tools to make the system better. I just want to tell you about our relationship with Unisys, which is very positive at this point. We've had a great trial run on 2 different machines in Minnesota. Some enhancements added as a result of that. And of course, machines there that are very large and with huge number of files. We are working together with Unisys to tell the customers about the system, and we're anxious to make some good offers for you, especially existing STAR customers. Another point I'd like to make is if any of you have real-life instances of a problem that was difficult to solve in your storage environment, we'd love to hear about it and perhaps be able to show you how ESP would have made that problem resolution much easier. So with that, I'll thank you all for being here. Please give us a call.
Question and answers.
I'm sorry?
Question and answers.
Yeah, if you have any questions or anything you'd like to tell us about at this point, that's fine. As the slide says, we would refer you to the replay of both the previous webinar and this one, which this one will be put up in a few days.
Yes.
We have videos online that you can look at, and if you want to do a private demonstration for other people in your organization, of course, we would love to do that. So I'll turn it back to Tony for some questions if you have them, and we'll go from there.
This is always the black hole of Calcutta, because the first person's afraid to speak. So I'll offer a free Coke at the next Unite conference to the first person with a question. once again, my Coke is safe.
All right, so since it doesn't appear that there are any questions out there, this is Tim again. I will be sending you an email that will have a questionnaire on it. We'd like to get some feedback on today's webinar, and it'll also have today's recording on it. You'll be able to share that with coworkers or upper management or anybody within your system that you think should see this. It'll be today's webinar, and we put it usually out on YouTube, and you'll be able to click on that link and view it. Tony did go through a lot of information. He was tooling around in there. I know for first-time users, first-time people seeing the product, that's when the video that I'm going to send you becomes very handy in reviewing what you've seen today. So until you get another email from you, we're signing off for today. Another email from me. We're signing off today, and hope to catch you at another time. Thank you very much. Bye.